Okay, we're going to take a look at some wind options now. And the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and load in a tree. So I'll right mouse click to load our species. And I'm going to load the rural maple tree and click OK. Now we want to go ahead and click on our top view here. And if you don't see this little blue controller that we have for our wind, what you're going to need to do is go up to Atmosphere, Atmosphere Editor, and under the Wind tab, just go ahead and check Enable Breeze and Enable Wind. And we can go ahead and click OK then. Now, with this controller, we can go ahead and control our wind so that it's much more intense than we would have it on the settings just for our normal defaults that are located in the atmosphere editor. I'm going to bring up our display timeline, which you do by hitting F11 or going to animation display timeline. And then if you get the animation wizard, you can just go ahead and close that out, which will look like this. You could just go up to the top here and close that out because we're not going to need it. And as we kind of scroll through, you can see that the leaves are sort of fluttering just a little. We do have a little bit of wind affecting it, but not much. So if you want to go a little bit more intense with how much wind you have, you can use this controller. And this controller is also has the ability to be keyframed. So let's just go ahead and go to 5 seconds into the animation, and we'll just move this kind of off to the side. And now if we take a look at our preview, we can see our tree is really being blown by this wind. But we also created a keyframe. So if we move this back, and I kind of have a little animation going here. I'll just center our first frame. And we can kind of watch our tree as it moves back. It might be easier to see than the other viewports with this camera. We just kind of have it zooming in on the side, and we can see our tree moving backwards the more the wind affects it. And what we can also do is pull this down really far if we wanted to. So if you're animating something kind of like a hurricane, you can use this to make your trees extremely blown. Of course, in a case like this would probably break the tree. So maybe accentuating it not so much might be a little more realistic. But we can bring this around just about anywhere and just kind of position our trees. We can also use this for tree shaping. If you're doing stills, or even just checking off the fluttering of the leaves and things like that, and you have an animation where you want to sort of position your trees, you can go ahead and just kind of move them around and do some tree shaping this way. Because you won't be able to get this kind of effect with the plan editor. So this is a good way to sort of shape out your trees a little bit differently. And we can take a look and see how it affects different trees, even plants. But we'll go ahead and grab the coconut tree. And we can click on the top, and now we have that. And go ahead and just move that around, and we can see the effect that that is creating. At least in this viewport, not so much in the camera view. So go ahead and move that. But we can see it creates a very intense effect the more we bring it over. So it's a good way to kind of create our hurricane type scenes where we'll have maybe coconut trees going off to the sides as they would during a hurricane. But notice the leaves. And I'll just start bringing this back a little bit. And you'll notice that our leaves are expanded normally, but once you get to a certain point with the wind, they really kind of fold out. And that might not be entirely realistic if they're kind of stuck in that position and not fluttering too much. But there's also other things we can do with this. And I'm just going to kind of create a sample scene just to kind of show you something neat we could do. So I'm going to go to File, New. I'm going to select our Clear Springs guy, and I'm not going to save it. And I won't go in and actually create this whole scene just because it can be kind of take a kind of a long time to do this. But it is a really neat trick. And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and load in just a sphere. I'm going to squish it down. And then I'm going to go ahead into our material editor and just set our reflections to 100%. And this is going to sort of represent kind of like a spaceship. It's kind of a cheesy looking spaceship, very simple, but it'll get the point across. And we can just create a small animation. And I'll go up to display timeline. And we're going to do, let's just go up to maybe 6 seconds here. And we're going to move our spaceship up like it's sort of taking off. And now what I want to do is kind of surround this area with plants. So we have our spaceship taking off. Just a real simple animation. And I'm going to go ahead and add in some plants. And anyone will do. I'm going to go ahead and use the Mexican palm trees. And I'm just going to position that tree. Making sure we're on frame 0, because we want to start this at the start of the animation. And I'm just going to move some sort of around this area. Copy and paste. And I'm not going to worry too much about the solid growth just at this moment. So I'm just going to be copying and pasting these same trees. If you want, you can go ahead and create new types of plant for this Mexican palm so that they're different and not all the same. Of course, we can go ahead and just size these as well too. But I just want to surround this area with these trees. And I'm going to move our camera out so we can see what's going on just a little bit better. And we'll take a look at our animation. And we just kind of have our spaceship taking off. Well, we're going to go to our last frame now. And since we have our wind checked within the atmosphere editor and the breeze on, click OK. Now we have these control handles. And what I can go ahead and do is just sort of pull these out for each one of our trees going outward the direction of where our spaceship is taking off. And of course you can do this in as many rows as you want, but each tree is going to have to be animated individually, unless you animate a tree and then kind of bring that over. And you can have groups all going the same direction and just copy and paste them, because those keyframes will stick with it if you copy and paste. But this is just kind of a quick method to show you with a few trees, and not with a whole. You don't really need a whole bunch. We'll just move this out. Okay, so now we can take a look at our animation. And maybe this tree was not the best because the actual trunk itself isn't moving. But we can see that with our spaceship taking off, all of our leaves are kind of jetting out, and our plants are sort of bending and twisting to match sort of the animation along with that spaceship that would be sort of taking off and maybe pushing out wind. And if it's a high enough speed, you might get that kind of effect. And it looks really neat if you have a whole bunch of different trees in there, all different types, different species, ones that will bend more. But we can really see how that kind of takes effect. But we can also go ahead and maybe try it with the different species of plant. So we'll go ahead and just delete these palm trees that we created. Going back to frame 0. And then loading in a tree that will bend more. So let's bring back that maple tree we had before. And we'll kind of position that. And we can copy and paste and just move that around. And I'm just using Control-C and Control-V for copy and paste. And once you copy the first one, all you really have to do is hit Control-V and paste it in, and then grab it, and we can move it into position. I'm just going to throw another one in here. And space those out. Alright, now we can go back to our last frame. And start positioning these trees again. We're kind of moving them just outward, the direction they should be facing if this was actually a spaceship and this was taking off. And the intensity, of course, you can adjust as much as you want. And if you watch at the bottom left-hand corner of your view window, you'll see the intensity of the wind. And as I drag this, we have the intensity going up to 90, so we can watch that and keep it consistent if we wanted to, or we could vary it. And we also have the direction of the wind down there, which is showing up. And that's all the way down here, where we have the intensity of the wind and the direction of the wind. So we can really be precise if we wanted to. And we'll just take a look at this animation. And of course we have the same trees here, but we can see that we have all of our plants kind of going outward as we have this animation. So it looks pretty neat. And like I said, all you got to do is once we have these first sets of trees made, of course you'll probably want to go in and make some different ones, rotate them around and whatnot so they look not like the same tree copied over and over. You can start selecting these trees and just copy and paste. Of course, you'll always be doing that on frame 0, so I'm going to undo that. Go back to frame 0. I'm going to copy and paste, and we can move that into sort of that region. And you could do that with each one where you copy and paste and then start bringing it out a little bit broader. And then you'll have all the trees facing the right direction, and you can make a whole forest of them this way, and have a really neat looking scene where you'll have a much better looking spaceship than this taking off. But it's a really neat technique for any type of scene like that, or if you have an airplane or something like that flying very close to the trees, or a helicopter, you could either split them, part them, and things like that. Of course, you'll have to do it with individual trees, and you can't really do it with an ecosystem, but it is a very neat effect and kind of a neat little trick that you can do to create some pretty neat looking scenes.